Hashem, Yahushai Ba'Hashem Rakakwadash, and them honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and salutations to the hopeful elect. This is your brother, I am Noah Allah from Gemini, Chicago, and coming back with you with another lesson, basically going into prophecy. And I just decided to use this article because I find some real interesting things that is in this article, so that I can make a lesson about. Let's go ahead and jump straight into prophecy. But here it says, Russia has given Iran something more important than weapons. Russia's political backing of Iran and its opposition to military escalations that prove more subsequently than military aid in shaping the conflict. It says, the visit of Iran Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to Russia once again raises questions about Moscow's position on the conflict between Iran on one side and the United States and Israel on the other. This visit should not come as a surprise. Russia is a great power and a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Iran and Russia are also friendly states. Alright, and hey, according to prophecy, alright, Gog and Magog shall be a guard unto them. Alright, the fulfillment of Ezekiel chapter 30, 39, 38 and 39 is about to come to pass. Alright. Oh, the hell. Now let's, we get there right now. But you can see how Russia, in the future, right? Russia is basically going to defend, those Arab League nations and Iran, right? Ezekiel 38 and 1, it says, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog in the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Gog and Magog is basically going into Russia. They go into that word chief, right? It basically goes into the word Rasha, right? Rasha, alright? Which is very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Oh, same thing with, Prince. Probably should have word. Nonetheless, it says, Prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against them. And Meshech and Tubal, I believe is a land. Fuck. So lucky. And you can see how it's pointing out Russia, basically. And say, thus saith the Lord, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, O chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And that's right. Ultimately the Lord is going to put hooks onto Russia's jaws and basically lead them onto war. Alright? And hey, in the scriptures it tells you that the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Alright? The Lord is the one that's controlling your governors, your kings, basically everybody on this earth. Alright? The Lord is the one that is in control. It says, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. That's right. It says, and I will bring thee forth in all thy army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. And in the near future, alright, Russia is going to be a guard unto Iran and all them smaller nations. Alright? And they're going to bring their, their military personnel over there into the land of in the valley of Jehoshaphat, right, over there in the Levant, the war of Armageddon. It says Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya, all of them with shield and helmet, and all them other nations around that area are basically going to join future. North quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. And right now you're seeing the beginning stages of that prophecy that is coming to pass. All right, Russia is basically aiding Iran. All right, Russia is basically helping Iran in this war. All right, it says Iran and Russia are also friendly states as stipulated in 2025 treaty signed between them. Therefore, the most viable strategy is to promote peace, even if the military escalations offer short-term benefits. It says such as benefits do exist for Moscow, including rising oil prices and the diversion of attention away from the conflict in Ukraine. However, Russia is fully aware that a temporary improvement in the oil market does not remove the need to restructure its economy in the face of Western sanctions. It is also clear that the external conditions alone are insufficient for achieving its objectives in Ukraine. On this basis, Moscow does not focus on short-term gains, but instead places greater emphasis on resolving the conflict and mitigating its negative consequences. These include the potential humanitarian crisis in Iran, a global economic slowdown caused by excessively high energy prices, and the resulting drop in demand, the risk of a financial crisis due to disruptions in regional financial centers, and threats to Russian companies that have significant recent as aligned with its interests. Iran has managed to withstand a powerful military attack by the U.S. and Israel, which is often seen as a major tactical victory. And that's right. They have, better weapon capabilities. They have nuclear weapon capabilities, all right? Says Joel 3:2, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears, let the weak say I am strong. Alright, boy, yeah. So I'm going to start verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. And yeah, we're in the time of war right now. Alright? And it's only going to escalate. And all these other nations, including NATO, alright, they're also going to be led into this war of Armageddon. Yahweh Shaphat. Alright? The Valley of Jehoshaphat, the Levant. That is spoken in Joel 20. Alright? Already coming to pass. Alright? But it's going to be escalated to the point where there's going to be drafts. Alright? There's going to be drafts. Nonetheless, it says, verse 10, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears, let the weak say I'm strong. And all these small nations that America has been bullying, alright, you look at them, especially Iran, alright, they got better military personnel, they got, better weapons. Alright? And all of them are capable of, defending themselves against America and them small hats. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, alright, which is the war of Armageddon. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And then ultimately, the Lord is going to gather all these nations up to this war to judge them all at the end of the day. Alright, it says, put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full, for the fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. The multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. It was going to that word decision. You say is decision threshing instrument, sharp things. But basically, the Lord has a great sacrifice, in Basra and Idumea, which goes into Edom. But ultimately, it's not just Esau Edom good that is going to be judged. Right? All these heathen nations that have oppressed the apple of the Lord's eye, which is the nation of Israel, or the Lord's people, Esau too. Shall But nonetheless, let's go ahead and go back to the article because there's main points I want to touch on. It says, Iran has managed to withstand its powerful military attack by the U.S. and Israel, which is often seen as a major tactical victory. Iran has also succeeded in achieving a favorable diplomatic position as the U.S. and Israel have found themselves with a little meaningful support from other major powers. And you see, this is what Iran has succeeded on, right? Because everybody can see that America and Israel, right, they are basically the ones that are, stirring up conflict. All right, they're the ones that are basically leading all these nations into war. All right, and you can see how, there's a split between the U.S. and NATO, and that goes ahead and goes. All right. With NATO, and Iran was not coordinated with them. U.S. allies in the region have also suffered significantly as a result of the conflict, as military actions has weakened rather than strengthened their security. And that's right. The U.S. and the smarts, right, they ain't gonna win this war against NATO and the EU and the rest of them other nations such as Russia, China, right, the Lead nations, and Iran, right. According to the scriptures, right, America is bound to be destroyed, as what is prophesied. All right, the beast shall hate the horns and consume her with fire, which is a future prophecy that will come to place where America will be destroyed by ICBM nuclear missiles. All right, missiles that are to be shot from one end of the earth and reach unto the other. All right, it says China strongly opposes any military actions. As is often the case, the Beijing avoids escalation, but its position is clear and significant, particularly given its close economic ties with Iran. So ultimately, really, China is also going to get involved. All right. Iran entered the conflict diplomatically isolated, without its military allies being obligated to provide immediate assistance, yet the U.S. and Israel also find themselves diplomatically isolated. Washington has many allies, but their effective support remains unclear. Russia positions to help to break this current diplomatic isolation, reinforced by Argacchi's visit to Russia. Nevertheless, the situation remains highly fragile and dangerous, particularly for Iran. Despite the weakness of the anti-Iran coalition, the U.S. still retains broad scope to carry out military strikes at its discretion. And yeah, the U.S. is not going to stop them. Small hats are not going to stop, right? Because, you know, according to prophecy, right, the least of the flock is drying them up. Right, the least of the flock, them small hats that are drawing all these nations into war. All right, all these nations into the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon. All right, all of them. Jeremiah 49:20. Therefore, hear the counsel of the Lord that he had taken against Edom, and his purposes that he had against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And it's a beautiful thing, because hey, this is the end of Esau's rulership that we're seeing that is in motion right now. Jeremiah 50:45. Therefore hear ye the counsel of the Lord that he had taken against Babylon, and his purposes that he had purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Alright? Goes into the small hats, I believe. Chaldeans. Chaldea. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. At the noise of the taking of Babylon, the earth is moved, and the cry is heard among the nations. And that's right, future prophecy which America will be destroyed, including that land of, small land of, Damn, okay. Alright, this is the main point that I want to read into. Whoa. It is true that the U.S. may face temporary resource constraints. The war has revealed certain shortcomings in the organizations of its armed forces when confronting a major regional power, most notably the need to strengthen its naval fleet. However, the Washington remains largely insulated from any Iran retaliations. The Americans may need time to correct their mistakes, but they have ample time to do so, nor can the U.S. be considered hostage to a blockade. The Strait of Hormuz, it has already become the world's largest oil producer, and along with Canada and Mexico, is strengthening its leading position. That's right. All right. Basically, the U.S. is still in control of Venezuela's oil, and they have ties with Canada and Mexico, which both of them are producers of oil. All right. Well, I'll read this again. It says, but they have ample time to do so, nor can the U.S. be considered hostage to a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. It has already become the world's largest oil producer, and along with Canada and Mexico, is strengthening its leading position. Although Russia is unlikely to exert, and hey, what the U.S. is trying to do, like what the other bros be saying, that these European countries, they're going to suffer a major energy crisis, and they're going to be begging to the United States real soon for oil, for energy, but that's going to that's going to make the beast, the NATO and the EU, hate the whore even more, which is going according to prophecy. It says, although Russia is unlikely to exert a direct influence on the outcome of the conflict, its political stance and practical measures nonetheless to constitute an important factor in the equation shaping the coming Middle East crisis. Nonetheless, the Lord is really about to judge America in the nearby future. And hey, all them troops that basically crossed the border during Biden's term, they're already here. Alright, a lot of them are already here. There's Job 18:11. Actually, I want to read it, the entire thing. Job 18:11. It says, let's start with, verse 11. It says, terror shall make him afraid on every side, and shall drive him to his feet. The strength shall be hunger bent, and destruction shall be ready at his side. Actually, I don't think this is the one I was trying to get. Let's bring up Jeremiah 51. Let's start with just one. It says, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will rise up against Babylon, and against them that dwell in the midst of them, that rise up against me, and a destroying wind. Right, the future prophecy. Well, these nations are already gearing up against. That shall fan her, and shall empty her land. For in the day of trouble they shall be against her round about. And that's right, there's already foreigners in here. Alright, there's already foreign military that are basically here on this land of America. Alright? And this happened during the time when Biden's term, he opened the border to millions of, illegals, to millions of immigrants. Alright? Chinese, Russians, Venezuelans, all these other nations that, the French, Africa, alright, military-aged men, alright, military-aged fighting men, and a lot of them had already basically been, came through in the United States, but right now they're only just waiting for the green light, alright, to start, wreaking havoc on America. But basically, alright, America, is without protection. Alright, America's through. Alright, America has come to its weakest point in history. Alright, but nonetheless, hope this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praises, honors, and glories to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shalom.